many of you know, I always like all of you to think before a message of the specific title or theme. And this morning is a very important one. I want you all to remember it's very simple, and one that I think you've probably heard many times in your daily lives. And this is it. Gone to the dogs. Gone to the dogs. I remember some years ago driving through an old neighborhood where I used to live in St. Louis. It had changed. When I lived there, the modest homes were neat and clean, and the lawns were trimmed and well manicured, and the neighbors smiled and greeted one another. Now, the homes were crumbling. The lawns were infested with weeds. There were only a few people on the street, and there were no smiles, no greetings. They simply stared at me as if I was some unwanted intruder. And I felt like the neighborhood had gone to the dogs. I still remember seeing him at a class reunion. He was unrecognizable, grossly overweight with disheveled hair and wrinkled clothing, and I wondered what had happened to someone who was one of the brightest and most popular guys in the class. For when I looked at him, it looked as if his life had gone to the dogs. He sat in my office, staring at the floor. He had just told me about his ugly marital breakup. Pastor, I can't believe what has happened. I had everything, but now my life has gone to the dogs. Gone to the dogs is what we say when someone's life has fallen apart. The phrase, I did some research on this, probably originated in ancient China, of all places, where dogs were not cute pets, but disgusting creatures kept outside the walls of cities. There the dogs roamed, living off the rubbish that had been tossed over the walls by the residents. And likewise, social outcasts, perhaps even criminals, were expelled from the cities, and like dogs, had to live their lives scavenging the rubbish for food. It was said of such people that their lives had gone to the dogs. That is why Jesus' behavior in today's gospel is so disturbing. We prefer to think of gentle Jesus, meek and mild, full of love and compassion for everyone. And then we see how Jesus treats the Syrophoenician woman whose life had literally gone to the dogs. Instead of treating her with sympathy and compassion, Jesus insults her. Jesus had been living at an exhausting pace. He had been moving from town to town, preaching, teaching, healing the sick, and even raising the dead. Crowds had been following as if he was some sort of celebrity. Finally, Jesus has just got to get away from it all. And he leaves Jewish territory and goes away to hide in non-Jewish territory. the region called Tyre. Now, maybe there nobody would know him. Maybe there he could hide in anonymity. But even in this foreign country, this foreign territory, he could not escape his reputation. This unnamed Gentile woman literally accosts Jesus. She was desperate. Her life had gone to the dogs. She has no hope and little future. There is no mention of a husband or a family. She is alone. The worst possible place for a woman in that world and society, alone except for a daughter. But a daughter who can't help her. A daughter who is sick, very sick, so sick that his life was not even hers anymore. Mark says, yeah, she was possessed by something else, by an unclean spirit, a demon. Yet, she had heard about Jesus and that somehow he was different. He had welcomed outsiders. He was a friend of those who had little worth and even less social standing. So she, the Syrophoenician woman, dares to believe that Jesus can help her and begs Jesus to cast the unclean spirit out of her daughter. Now, Jesus responds with words that will be never memorized in Sunday school. With disgust and disdain, Jesus says to this upstart foreigner, let the children be fed first, for it is not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs. Remember, in Jesus' world, dogs were not cuddly pets. Dogs were disgusting scavengers, which no decent person would ever want to have close to them or associate with. These are not words of sensitivity and compassion. This is an insult, a put down. Jesus reminded her that she was a nobody, a Gentile, a Syrophoenician who had no place at his table or inside the city of God's people. She did not belong. She was just another dog. Why would Jesus treat her like this? Was Jesus just testing the strength of her faith? Was Jesus, still unsure about the scope of his mission? Should it include Gentiles who were not Jews, who had not been invited to the table? Did God use this woman to help Jesus grow in his understanding of his mission and who could be included in it? Was it an example of Jesus struggling with his own humanity, seeking to come to terms with just how wide and how inclusive God's kingdom could be? Frankly, I don't know. It could be any or all of these. Whatever the case, the woman stands for all of us who have ever felt that our lives have gone to the dogs. When our lives are falling apart, when the one we promise to love for better or worse in sickness and health until death do us part suddenly says, I am leaving you. When we get that phone call at 3 o'clock in the morning, and you know, no good news ever comes at that time of the night. When we are told that we no longer have the job that we thought was our dream job, when we are left out and uninvited to the party to which everyone else is going except us, when we feel that no one understands us and our pain, we are there with the Syrophoenician woman, desperately begging for help. When Jesus insulted her, it must have been like a wrenching punch to the gut. Here, the very one whom she trusted has rejected her. Jesus seems cold, indifferent, even hostile. She could have given up. She could have begun to doubt and question herself. Maybe she really was unworthy and undeserving. Maybe there was some deep, dark sin in her past of which Jesus knew, of which she had conveniently forgotten, and of which she should be ashamed. Maybe he's right. She's no better than a dog. We have all been there with her. We have all been haunted by the same doubts and fears when our life has gone south. We cannot be sure that we do not deserve this fate. Maybe our life has gone to the dogs, and for good reason. And we have been too proud and too self-satisfied to realize it until the roof falls in and the life we had so carefully planned crumbles. This unnamed woman stands for all of us. When the love of our life is possessed by a demon, some kind of evil, or some kind of sickness out of our control, all we can do is join her and beg. All we can do is cry for help. And that is what the Syrophoenician woman does. She will not give up. Tenaciously, she clings to the hope that she had glimpsed in Jesus. Her response to Jesus' insult is an amazing expression of faith. She does not dispute her helpless status. She knows that her life has gone to the dogs, and she has no leg to stand on. Yet, nevertheless, she believes, in spite of all the evidence to the contrary, she believes that Jesus will still be merciful to her. She says, "Sir, even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs." Maybe she had heard that Jesus had miraculously multiplied a few fish and loaves of bread and fed a crowd over 5,000, and there were still 12 baskets of leftovers. More than enough bread to feed even those who were no better than dogs. Maybe she had heard of Jesus rising from the dead, the daughter of Jairus, or Jesus driving an unclean spirit from that poor naked guy in the region of the Gerasenes, or that woman who had been bleeding for 10 years who just touched the hem of Jesus' garment. and was healed. Whatever the case, the promise of Jesus and the hope he represented had touched her heart. She believed, even in the face of Jesus' own criticism, that even the dogs, even a loser and a sinner and a Gentile like her, had a place at Jesus' table. And you know, Jesus would not let such faith go to waste. It is precisely for such people as this that Jesus has come. His whole life was about saving such losers in the name of the God. Jesus came to give his life for the dogs. You know, that woman had a lot of nerve. She sounds a lot like Abraham. Remember Abraham arguing with God over the fate of Sodom and Gomorrah? Or she sounds like Moses, arguing with God over the fate of the Israelites that God was about ready to give up on after he had delivered them from bondage in Egypt. She sounds like King David in Psalm 51, pleading for mercy after the prophet Nathan had confronted him about his sin with Bathsheba. Maybe she sounds like us, coming here on a Sunday morning, begging, confessing our sin, daring to believe that God will forgive us. Repeatedly, God's people have dared to believe in God's merciful heart, even in the face of God's own anger. Like so many before her, the faith of this woman would not be disappointed. And Jesus heals her daughter and frees her from the grip of that unclean spirit. You know, Jesus continued to defy social expectations and religious convention by eating and drinking with such dogs, with sinners and outcasts. And he does it all the way to the cross. And there, Jesus' life reaches its dramatic climax. There on the cross, even Jesus' life, dare we say it, goes to the dogs. There, even he admits that he is no better than a dog. My God, why have you forsaken me? Dying outside the city walls, at a place of the skull, at Golgotha, in the midst of the garbage dump where all the dogs scavenge. That is what love does. Love goes all the way, even to death on a cross. The marvel in all of this is that such love is at the heart of what God was always doing through Jesus. And so, we're not surprised, are we, on the third day, that God raises Jesus from the dead. You see, God's love did not run out of gas. There will be plenty of crumbs left over, even more than 12 baskets full, enough to feed the world, even those whose lives have gone to the dogs. Do you feel that your life has gone to the dogs? Do you feel forgotten, ignored, betrayed, humiliated? Do you feel desperate, hopeless, and disappointed by what you thought you could count on? Well, it is just for people like you and me, like all of us, whose lives have gone to the dogs. And it is to us dogs that Jesus has something very special to say. You are always welcome at my table. Oh, and for that gracious good news, what can we say? But thanks be to God.